The alarm cut through the quiet of medical station kindness like a blade through silk. Lena Voss looked up from her workstation, her hands already moving toward the emergency response panel before her conscious mind registered the sound. On the central display, 3 biosigns flickered red. Quellen patients. Ward 7. She was already running. The corridor stretched before her, walls the color of dawn on a world she'd never seen. Most species found the station's aesthetic soothing. Lena had learned to tolerate it. She burst through the ward doors and stopped. 3 Quellens lay in their suspension cradles, their translucent skin mottled with dark patches that spread even as she watched. Physician Imara stood between them, all 4 of their slender arms moving in the diagnostic patterns Lena had watched 1,000 times. But now those movements were hesitant, confused. Lena, Imara's voice carried none of its usual melodic certainty. I don't understand what's happening. Lena approached the nearest cradle and looked down at the patient. Female, if the term applied. Young. The dark patches weren't bruising. They were inflammation, severe inflammation. The biosign monitor showed elevated temperature, rapid cellular breakdown, cascading system failures. She knew these signs. She had seen them before, in human patients, in textbooks from old Earth, from the plagues and the wars and the centuries before humanity learned to manage what lived inside them. How long? Lena asked. 14 minutes since onset. We were treating them for routine mineral deficiency. Imara's primary arms gestured helplessly. Then this, all 3 at once. Lena pulled up the medical data on her handheld. The mineral treatments were standard, harmless, but something else was there. A pathogen signature, faint but present. Something the station's systems hadn't flagged because they weren't designed to flag it. Because in a galaxy where most species had never evolved pathogens, the sensors didn't know what to look for. But Lena did. It's an infection, she said quietly. Imara went very still. In Quellen physiology, stillness meant incomprehension so complete it bordered on system shock. Infection, Imara repeated, as if testing the weight of the word. That's the human concept, when foreign biology enters the body. Yes. But Quellens don't have, Imara stopped. Their skin had gone pale, nearly colorless. We don't have defenses against that. We never needed them. The patient in the nearest cradle convulsed. Her biosigns spiked, then dropped. Lena watched the numbers fall and felt something cold settle in her chest. I can help, she said, but you need to understand what's happening. You need to understand how human bodies would fight this. Imara looked at her. In their large, dark eyes, Lena saw trust. Decades of working together, of learning each other's medicine, of building something neither species had possessed before. She saw that trust, and she knew what her next words would do to it. The patient's biosigns went flat. The alarm changed pitch, final cessation, death. Imara made a sound Lena had never heard from them before, low and resonant and hollow. Their secondary arms reached for the cradle, as if touch could undo what had already happened. Please, Imara said, tell me how to stop this. Lena looked at the 2 remaining patients, still alive, still dying. She thought about the comfortable silence she could choose, the way she could step back and let ignorance be mercy. But the biosigns were falling. All right, Lena said, I'll explain. She pulled up a holographic display between them, a simplified human body rotating slowly in the air. Imara watched it, their posture shifting into the attentive stance Lena recognized as their learning mode. Around them, the ward's quiet sounds continued. Somewhere, a monitor beeped. Ventilation hummed. The second patient's breathing had become labored. In humans, Lena began, our bodies are not unified. We're not one organism. We're an ecosystem. Imara's head tilted slightly. I don't understand. Our bodies contain trillions of bacteria, fungi, viruses. Most of them are beneficial or at least neutral, but some are harmful. and our bodies can't tell which is which just by their presence, so we evolved something else. She manipulated the hologram, highlighting the cardiovascular system. We have specialized cells, white blood cells, leukocytes. They patrol our bodies constantly, looking for anything that seems foreign. Like the station's security systems, Amara said slowly. Yes, but more aggressive. Lena felt the weight of that word. When these cells find something they identify as an invader, a pathogen, foreign tissue, sometimes even our own cells if they're damaged, they attack it. Imara's secondary arms drew closer to their body, a gesture Lena had learned meant unease. Attack. They release chemicals that cause inflammation, swelling, heat, pain. They call in more white blood cells. Some of these cells eat the invaders. Others produce antibodies, proteins designed to tag specific threats so they can be destroyed more efficiently. She expanded the hologram to show the process. White cells swarming, tissue swelling, the cascade of chemical signals that turned the body into a battlefield. Imara watched in silence. The inflammation you're seeing in your patients, Lena continued. That's what happens when a body tries to fight an infection but doesn't have the systems to control the response. The pathogen triggers cellular damage. The cells release distress signals. But without white blood cells, without an immune system, there's nothing to coordinate a defense, just uncontrolled destruction. The second patient convulsed. Her cradle's containment field strengthened automatically, holding her steady as her body twisted against itself. Lena checked the readings and felt her jaw tighten. She's going into shock, Lena said. Systemic inflammation. In humans, we'd call this a cytokine storm. When the immune response becomes so aggressive it starts destroying healthy tissue along with the threat. But Quellins don't have an immune response, Imara said. No, but the cellular damage mimics one. The pathogen is triggering inflammatory pathways that your species never evolved to regulate, because you never needed to. Imara moved to the patient's cradle, their hands hovering over the controls. What do we do? Lena pulled up the pathogen analysis. It was bacterial, simple in structure. On Earth, it would have been defeated by a healthy immune system within days. Here, it was a massacre. We need to suppress the inflammation, corticosteroids, and antibiotics to kill the pathogen itself. Antibiotics, Imara tested the word, substances that kill bacteria. Yes. We don't keep such things on the station. Why would we? We don't have bacteria that harm us. I know, Lena accessed the station's pharmaceutical database, but we can synthesize them. I can provide the formulas, human medical archives. Imara was silent for a long moment. On the display, the third patient's biosigns began to deteriorate. Time was narrowing to a blade's edge. Do it, Imara said. Lena's fingers moved across her interface. She transmitted the formulas to the station's pharmaceutical synthesizers, tagged them urgent, watched the confirmation flash green. 18 minutes for synthesis. Longer than she wanted. Less time than the patients probably had. She turned back to Imara. There's something else you need to know. Imara's attention sharpened. Yes. The immune system doesn't just fight infections. It fights everything it perceives as foreign, transplanted organs, blood transfusions from incompatible donors, sometimes even pollen or food proteins, which is why humans have allergies. Lena watched Imara's face carefully. And sometimes it attacks the body itself. That's autoimmune disease, when the defense system can't distinguish between invader and self. The third patient's breathing stopped. For a moment, Lena thought they'd lost her. Then the biosign stuttered back, weak but present. Your body attacks itself, Imara said softly. That's what you're telling me, that human bodies are designed to destroy. They're designed to survive, Lena said. This is how we survived. Imara turned away from the cradles. Their posture had changed, become more closed. I need to inform Counselor Tame. They're the Assembly's medical ethics representative on station. Imara. This is beyond station protocol, Lena. You know that. Imara's voice was gentle, but something in it had shifted. If human medicine can save these patients, we must use it. But the Assembly needs to know what human biology entails, what it means that you carry these systems inside you. Lena wanted to argue, wanted to explain that context mattered, that evolutionary history wasn't moral judgment, that the immune system was salvation as much as violence. But she looked at the dying patients and said nothing. Imara left the ward. The doors whispered shut behind them. Lena stood alone with the two remaining Quellans. Their biosigns fluctuated on the monitors, red and amber, and the faintest touch of green where stability tried to take hold. She thought about the pharmaceuticals synthesizing in the lab below. She thought about Imara's face, the way their posture had closed. She thought about the word attack and how many times she'd said it. The ward's lighting shifted to evening mode, a gradual dimming meant to match circadian rhythms that didn't apply to half the species here. Lena pulled up a chair and sat between the two cradles. She would wait. She would monitor. And when the medicines were ready, she would save these lives. If they still wanted her to. The synthesizers completed their work in 16 minutes. Lena administered the first doses herself, watching the compounds enter the patient's systems through the cradle's integrated delivery matrix. The corticosteroids first, to suppress the runaway inflammation. Then the antibiotics, broad spectrum and carefully calibrated for Quellan physiology. She'd done the calculations 3 times. She couldn't afford to be wrong. Within 20 minutes, the biosigns began to stabilize. The dark mottling on their skin started to fade, color returning in gradual waves. Lena documented everything, her hands steady even as something in her chest felt like it was pulling apart. The ward doors opened. Imara returned, but not alone. 3 other physicians entered with them, a Keshari with their distinctive crystalline carapace, a Vorn whose form seemed to shift in the station's air, and another Quellan Lena didn't recognize. Behind them came Counselor Tame. Tame was older than Imara, their skin bearing the deep translucence that came with age in their species. They moved with deliberate care, their 4 arms held in a posture Lena had learned meant formal observation. They were wearing their assembly insignia, a band of woven light across their chest. "Dr. Voss," Tame said. Their voice carried the harmonics of perfect diplomatic training. "Physician Imara has briefed me on the situation. I see your interventions have been successful." Lena stood, wiping her hands on her medical coat though they weren't dirty. Old habit. "The patients are stable. The inflammation is decreasing. I expect full recovery within the next standard cycle." "Extraordinary." Tame moved closer to the nearest cradle, studying the patient with the kind of attention Lena associated with specimen observation. "Imara tells me you used something called antibiotics, and that you had to explain human immune function to provide context." "Yes, Counselor. I would like to understand this better." Tame turned to face her fully. "The Assembly takes medical knowledge sharing very seriously, especially when it concerns species integration." Lena felt the other physicians watching her. The Keshari's compound eyes reflected the ward's light in fractal patterns. The Vorn had gone very still, their form barely moving in a way that suggested intense focus. "What would you like to know?" Lena asked. "Everything," Tame said, "from the beginning." Lena looked at Imara. Her friend's face was unreadable, their posture neutral. No help there, no guidance. She was alone with this. She pulled up the holographic display again. The human body rotated between them, internal systems highlighted in soft blue light. "Human beings evolved on a world filled with pathogens," she began. "Bacteria, viruses, fungi, parasites. Our environment was hostile in ways most galactic species never experienced. So we developed a defense system. We call it the immune system." "We know this," the Keshari physician said. Their voice had a crystalline quality, each word precisely formed. "This was in your species integration documents, but the documents were sparse. Because we weren't sure how to explain it," Lena admitted. "How to make it sound like anything other than what it is." "And what is it?" Tame asked. Lena took a breath. "War, constant cellular-level war." The silence that followed felt heavy. She continued before she could stop herself. "Our bodies produce billions of white blood cells every day. These cells circulate through our blood, our lymphatic system, our tissues. They're looking for threats. When they find something foreign, a bacterial cell, a viral particle, a fungus, they attack it." She manipulated the hologram, showing white blood cells engulfing bacteria. Some immune cells eat the invaders directly. Others release toxic chemicals that destroy them. Still others produce antibodies, proteins specifically shaped to bind to foreign molecules and mark them for destruction. The Vorn physician's form rippled. "You said destroy 3 times in as many sentences." "Because that's what it is. Destruction." Lena felt something hard settle in her voice. "The immune system's job is to kill, to identify threats and eliminate them before they can harm the body." Imara spoke for the first time since returning. "Tell them about inflammation." Lena nodded. "When immune cells detect a threat, they trigger inflammation. Blood vessels dilate. Fluid leaks into surrounding tissue, causing swelling. Temperature increases locally. These changes help more immune cells reach the site and make it harder for pathogens to survive." "This is what we saw in the patients," Tame said. "This inflammation." "Yes, but in your patients, there were no immune cells to control the response. Just the inflammatory cascade itself, triggered by cellular damage. Like a fire alarm going off but no firefighters to direct the water." "And in humans," the Keshari asked, "the immune system controls this." "Usually, when it works correctly." "And when it doesn't?" Lena felt the question like a weight on her chest. "When it doesn't, the immune system can cause massive damage. Cytokine storms, where the inflammatory response becomes so severe it destroys healthy tissue along with infected tissue. Sepsis, where inflammation goes systemic and causes organ failure. Anaphylaxis, where the immune system reacts so violently to a harmless substance that it can kill the host within minutes." She pulled up medical images from human cases, bodies covered in hives, swollen airways, tissue destruction from severe inflammatory responses. The other physicians leaned in, their various forms of attention focused on the display. "This is from an allergic reaction," Lena said, indicating an image. "The immune system identifying a protein from a plant as a threat and mounting a full defensive response. This is anaphylactic shock. The person's throat swelling shut, their blood pressure dropping, their heart struggling to function, all because they ate something with peanuts in it. The immune system killed them," the Vorn said, "over a plant protein. The immune system tried to defend them. It was wrong about the threat level. That's the problem with a system designed for constant warfare. Sometimes it can't distinguish between a real danger and a false alarm." Tame moved closer to the display. "Show us more." Lena cycled through images. Autoimmune diseases where the immune system attacked the body's own tissues. Rheumatoid arthritis, joints destroyed by immune cells that thought they were fighting invaders. Type 1 diabetes, insulin-producing cells killed by a misdirected immune response. Multiple sclerosis, the protective coating of nerves stripped away. "Your bodies attack themselves," the Keshari said quietly. "Sometimes, yes." "How do you live like this?" Imara asked. Their voice was soft, but something in it made Lena's chest tighten. "How do you function knowing your own body might turn on you?" "Because most of the time it doesn't." Lena closed the image files. "Most of the time the immune system does its job. It fights off infections we'd otherwise die from. It kills cancer cells before they can multiply. It remembers pathogens and responds faster the second time we encounter them. That's why humans can be vaccinated against diseases. We train the immune system to recognize specific threats. But the cost, Tame said, the constant inflammation, the risk of autoimmunity, the violence of the response, is the price we pay for survival. Lena looked at each of them in turn. Humans wouldn't exist without immune systems. Our world would have killed us. This is how we lived long enough to develop consciousness, to build civilizations, to reach the stars. And now you bring that violence with you, the Vorn said. Lena felt the words like a physical blow, but she couldn't deny them. Yes, she said, we do. The ward fell silent. On the monitors, the patient's biosigns held steady, the green traces of health slowly strengthening. Lives saved by understanding violence. Lives that would have been lost without it. Tame's secondary arms moved in a gesture Lena didn't recognize. Dr. Voss, I need you to continue this explanation, but not here. This conversation must be formally documented, for the Assembly's records. You mean for the vote, Lena said. Tame didn't deny it. Humanity's integration into galactic medical systems was conditional. You know this. The Harmonious Integration Accord specified that human biology must be compatible with peaceful coexistence, that human medical practices must not conflict with assembly ethics. And you think the immune system violates that? I think, Tame said carefully, that the assembly needs to understand what human biology truly entails, what it means to have species among us whose very survival depends on cellular violence. This is not a judgment, Dr. Voss. It is due diligence. Lena looked at Amara. Her friend's face was still unreadable, but their posture had shifted, closed, distant. The trust she'd seen before was gone, or at least buried under something heavier. When? Lena asked. Now, Tame said, the patients are stable, you've documented your protocols, others can monitor them. Tame glanced at the other physicians. We need to know everything, before more lives are at risk. Lena thought about arguing, thought about demanding time to prepare, to find the right words, to figure out how to explain evolution without making it sound like justification. But the other physicians were already gathering, their attention fixed on her with the weight of species judgment. She saved her medical notes and closed her interface. Lead the way, she said. The assembly chamber on Medical Station Kindness wasn't designed for trials. It was designed for collaboration, with circular seating and holographic displays meant to show medical data from multiple perspectives. But as Lena entered and saw the assembled physicians, representatives, and observers, it felt like a courtroom. Tame guided her to the center of the room. A holographic recording array activated, multiple sensors tracking her from different angles. Everything she said here would be preserved, transmitted to assembly worlds, analyzed by xenobiologists and ethicists and politicians. She stood alone in the center. Dr. Lena Voss, Tame began formally, human immunologist assigned to Medical Station Kindness. You've been asked to provide testimony regarding human immune function and its implications for galactic medical integration. Do you consent to this documentation? I do. Then please continue your explanation. We want to understand the complete picture. Lena pulled up her holographic interface. The human body appeared again, rotating slowly. She'd shown this diagram 1,000 times to students, to colleagues, to curious alien physicians who wanted to understand Earth biology, but never like this, never with the weight of judgment pressing down on every word. I'll start with the basics, she said. The human immune system has two main components, innate immunity and adaptive immunity. She highlighted the relevant systems in the hologram. Innate immunity is our first line of defense, physical barriers like skin, chemical barriers like stomach acid, and cells that respond immediately to any threat they detect. These cells don't need training. They're born knowing how to fight. Born knowing how to kill, someone said from the audience. Lena couldn't see who. Yes, she said, born knowing how to kill. She zoomed in on a white blood cell, showing its structure. This is a neutrophil. It's the most common type of white blood cell in humans. When it encounters a bacterium, it engulfs it through a process called phagocytosis. Then it releases enzymes and toxic chemicals inside itself that digest the bacterium. The neutrophil essentially eats the threat and dissolves it. Murmurs rippled through the chamber. Lena continued. But that's just the beginning. The adaptive immune system is more sophisticated. It learns. She pulled up a new diagram showing T cells and B cells. These are lymphocytes. They're trained in human organs called the thymus and bone marrow. Each lymphocyte is unique, designed to recognize a specific molecular pattern. When a lymphocyte encounters its matching pattern, a specific protein from a virus, for instance, it activates. What happens when it activates? Tame asked. It multiplies rapidly. Within days, one activated lymphocyte becomes thousands, all of them targeting the same threat. Lena showed the process, cells dividing in exponential cascades. Some become killer T cells that destroy infected cells. Others become helper T cells that coordinate the immune response. B cells produce antibodies, millions of copies of proteins designed to stick to the invader and mark it for destruction. She paused, choosing her next words carefully. This is what makes human medicine so powerful. Once we've fought off an infection, we remember it. Memory cells remain in our bodies for years, sometimes for life. If we encounter the same pathogen again, we respond within hours instead of days. That's immunity. That's how vaccines work. We show the immune system a safe version of a threat, and it learns to fight the real version before we ever encounter it. So every human carries memories of violence, Amara said quietly. They'd taken a seat near the front, their posture still closed. Every infection you've survived is recorded, prepared to fight again. That's one way to see it, Lena said. Another way is that we carry memories of survival, every disease we've overcome, every threat we've learned to handle. The distinction seems semantic, the Keshari physician said. The mechanism is the same, violence in response to threat. Lena felt her jaw tighten. Yes, the mechanism is violence, but the purpose is protection. Tell them about cytokine storms, Tame said. That's what you called it, when the immune response kills the host. Lena pulled up medical data from Earth's history. In 1918, Earth experienced a pandemic of influenza virus. The virus itself wasn't exceptionally deadly, but it triggered cytokine storms in many patients, overwhelming immune responses that filled the lungs with fluid and caused respiratory failure. Millions died, not from the virus but from their own immune systems. She showed more recent data. During the COVID-19 pandemic in the early 21st century, we saw the same thing. The virus would infect lung tissue. The immune system would respond with massive inflammation. Patients drowned in the fluid their own bodies produced trying to fight the infection. The chamber was silent. Lena continued, unable to stop now. And it's not just infections. Transplant rejection happens when the immune system recognizes transplanted organs as foreign and attacks them. We have to suppress the immune system with drugs to prevent this. But suppressing the immune system leaves patients vulnerable to infections. It's a constant balance between too much immune response and not enough. You have to poison yourselves, the Vorn said, to stop your bodies from destroying donor organs. We have to modulate the immune response, Lena corrected. Yes, with drugs that have side effects, but those side effects are preferable to rejection. Are they? Tame asked quietly. Is this how humans define medicine, choosing between different kinds of harm? Lena felt something cold settle in her stomach. All medicine involves trade-offs, risk versus benefit, side effects versus disease. But for most species, those trade-offs don't include fighting their own bodies. Tame's voice was gentle. which somehow made it worse. Most species don't have to balance internal warfare with external healing. Most species, Lena said, didn't evolve in environments as hostile as Earth. No, Tame agreed. They didn't, and perhaps that's the problem. The recording array pulsed softly, capturing everything. Lena looked around the chamber and saw the faces watching her, curiosity in some, fascination in others, but in many she saw something else: revulsion, fear, the look people gave to things they couldn't understand and didn't want to. Continue, Tame said. Tell us about autoimmune diseases. Lena wanted to refuse, wanted to walk out, to stop feeding them ammunition against her species. But the patients in Ward 7 were alive because she'd explained this. Others might need that knowledge. She couldn't let pride or fear stop her from teaching. She pulled up a new series of images. Autoimmune diseases occur when the immune system mistakes the body's own tissues for threats. The mechanisms are complex and not fully understood, but the result is that immune cells attack healthy organs. She showed them lupus, where the immune system attacked kidneys, joints, skin; rheumatoid arthritis, where cartilage and bone were destroyed; Hashimoto's thyroiditis, where the thyroid gland was slowly obliterated; multiple sclerosis, where the protective myelin coating of nerves was stripped away, leaving signals unable to transmit properly. In type 1 diabetes, she said, immune cells destroy the insulin-producing cells in the pancreas. The body loses the ability to regulate blood sugar. Without treatment, insulin injections, the patient dies. But they're not dying from infection or injury. They're dying because their immune system killed the cells they needed to survive. How common is this? Someone asked. Autoimmune diseases affect roughly 8% of humans, Lena said. Some estimates are higher, and the numbers are increasing, though we're not sure why. 8%, Tame repeated. That's nearly 1 in 10 humans whose bodies are actively destroying themselves. That's one way to frame it, Lena said, and heard the edge in her own voice. Another way is that 92% of humans live their entire lives with immune systems that function correctly, that protect them from thousands of potential infections without ever causing harm. But the risk is always there, Imara said. Every human carries the potential for their body to turn against them. Yes, Lena said, we do. The chamber fell silent again. Lena looked at her hands and realized they were shaking slightly. She forced them still. Are there other consequences? Tame asked. Other ways the immune system causes harm? Lena laughed, and it came out bitter. You want the complete list: allergies, where the immune system attacks harmless substances; asthma, where airways constrict in response to perceived threats; celiac disease, where eating gluten triggers intestinal damage; inflammatory bowel disease; psoriasis; scleroderma. The list is extensive. She pulled up more data, more images of inflamed tissue and damaged organs. And then there's cancer immunosuppression. Some cancers evade the immune system by producing signals that tell immune cells to stand down. The very system designed to protect us can be tricked into allowing tumors to grow. So it can fail in both directions, the Keshari said. Too much response or too little. Exactly. The immune system has to navigate an impossible balance. React too strongly and it destroys healthy tissue. React too weakly and infections or cancer kill us. Most of the time it finds that balance, but not always. Tame moved to stand beside the holographic display. Dr. Voss, I want to be clear about what we're documenting here. You're telling us that human biology is fundamentally based on internal violence, that human bodies are in constant conflict with themselves and their environment. That survival for your species means maintaining a state of perpetual warfare at the cellular level. I'm telling you, Lena said, that human biology evolved in response to external threats, that we developed systems to defend ourselves, that those systems sometimes make mistakes, but more often they save our lives. And yet, Tame said gently. When physician Amara asked for your help with the dying patients, your first instinct was dread. You knew how we would react to this knowledge. You knew we would see it as violence. Lena met Tame's eyes. Yes, I knew. Why? Because it is violent. I'm not denying that. Immune responses are aggressive, destructive, and sometimes indiscriminate. But violence in defense of life isn't the same as violence for its own sake. Context matters. Intent matters. Does it? Amara stood, their posture rigid. You carry genocide inside you, Lena. That's what you've described. Billions of cells programmed to identify and destroy anything deemed foreign. And you're asking us to see that as normal, as acceptable. I'm asking you to see it as survival, Lena said. Nothing more, nothing less. But that's the problem. Amara's voice cracked slightly. We've built a galactic society on the principle that violence is never necessary, that cooperation and understanding can replace conflict. And now we're learning that one of our member species can't exist without violence, that it's built into every cell of your body. Lena felt something break inside her. You think we chose this? You think humans decided to evolve immune systems just to make integration difficult? I think, Amara said quietly, that your species evolved in ways that make you fundamentally incompatible with the peace we're trying to build. The words hung in the air. Lena stared at her friend, at the person who'd taught her Quellan physiology, who'd laughed at her jokes about human caffeine addiction, who'd spent years working beside her, and now looked at her like she was a threat. Then why did you accept us? Lena asked. Why did the Assembly approve human integration if you knew we were different? Because we didn't know, Tame said. Not truly. Your integration documents mentioned immune systems, mentioned defense against disease, but they didn't explain what that meant. They didn't show us the violence of it. We didn't hide it, we described the mechanisms. In technical terms that didn't convey the reality. Tame gestured at the holographic images still floating in the air. Inflamed tissue, destroyed organs, bodies at war with themselves. This is what you should have shown us. This is what honest integration would have looked like. Would you have accepted us if we had? Lena asked. Tame didn't answer immediately. The silence stretched, and in it, Lena heard her answer. I don't know, Tame finally said, and that's precisely the problem we now face. One of the observers, a species Lena didn't recognize, rose from their seat. I move that we suspend Dr. Voss's medical privileges pending further review. Seconded, another voice called. Lena felt the chamber shift around her. The recording array pulsed faster, capturing the moment. That's not necessary, she said. I've told you what you wanted to know. I've saved your patients. What more do you want? We want to understand the implications, Tame said. Not just for medicine, but for integration as a whole. If human biology is fundamentally violent, if your very survival depends on systems we find abhorrent, then we need to reconsider what human presence means for the Assembly. You mean you need to decide if we're too dangerous to keep around? We need to decide, Tame said carefully, whether the benefits of human medical knowledge outweigh the moral cost of accepting a species whose existence is predicated on violence. Lena looked around the chamber. Dozens of eyes in shapes and colors Earth had never imagined, all watching her, judging her entire species based on the mechanisms of cellular defense. The vote on human medical status will proceed, Tame announced. All member species will be notified. Dr. Voss, you're dismissed from this session. You're confined to human quarters until further notice. What about my patients? Lena demanded. The Quellans in Ward 7 still need monitoring. Other physicians can handle that now. You've provided the protocols. Tame's voice softened slightly. This isn't personal, Dr. Voss, but we need to process what we've learned. It's not personal, Lena repeated. You're just deciding whether my entire species deserves medical isolation. Nothing personal about that. Imara stepped forward. Lena. Don't, Lena cut them off. You've made your position clear. She turned and walked toward the chamber doors. Behind her, she heard voices rising, debate beginning. The recording array continued its quiet pulse, documenting everything for posterity, for the vote that would determine humanity's place among the stars. The doors opened, she stepped through. And stopped. In the corridor outside stood more physicians, human and otherwise. They parted as she emerged, and in their faces she saw the same thing she'd seen in the chamber: curiosity, fascination, revulsion. Dr. Chen, one of the 3 other human physicians on the station, met her eyes. "How bad?" he asked quietly. "Bad," Lena said. "They're voting on whether to restrict us to human-only facilities." Chen's jaw tightened. "Because of immune systems." "Because of what immune systems represent: violence, aggression, all the things the Assembly has tried to move beyond." "That's insane. We're doctors, we save lives." "With methods they find morally reprehensible." Lena started walking. Chen fell into step beside her. "They see antibiotics as chemical warfare. They see immune responses as internal genocide, and they're not entirely wrong. They're judging us for evolution. They're judging us for what we are." Lena stopped at the lift that would take her to the human quarters. "And what we are might not be compatible with what they want to build." The lift doors opened. She stepped inside. Chen started to follow, but she held up a hand. "Stay," she said. "Monitor the patients. Someone needs to." "Lena, please." Chen stepped back. The doors closed. Lena leaned against the lift wall as it descended. Her reflection looked back at her from the polished surface. Human, ordinary, carrying systems inside her that had evolved over millions of years to keep her alive. Systems that were now being debated like weapons. She thought about Imara's words: "You carry genocide inside you." She thought about Tame's question: "Is this how humans define medicine, choosing between different kinds of harm?" She thought about the 2 Quellan patients still alive in Ward 7, breathing because she'd understood what was killing them. Alive because of the knowledge she carried. Knowledge gained from millions of years of human bodies learning to fight. The lift reached her level. The doors opened. She stepped out into empty corridor and walked toward quarters that would now be her prison, until the Assembly decided if humanity deserved to stay. Days passed. Lena remained confined to the human section of the station, a cluster of rooms designed to feel like Earth that now felt like a cell. She received updates through official channels only. The patients in Ward 7 had recovered fully. The pathogen had been contained. Her protocols were being studied, adapted, prepared for potential future outbreaks. She should have felt proud. She'd saved lives. She'd advanced galactic medicine. Instead, she felt hollow. Dr. Chen visited when he could, bringing news from the rest of the station. The debate about human medical status had spread beyond kindness to Assembly worlds. Xenobiologists were analyzing human immune function. Ethicists were writing papers about the moral implications of species whose survival depended on cellular violence. Politicians were drafting proposals. "There are 3 main camps," Chen explained during one visit. They sat in the common area, surrounded by walls that displayed Earth landscapes, mountains and oceans and forests that felt more distant than the light years between them. One group wants immediate restriction. Humans only treat humans, only in human facilities. Complete medical segregation. "And the second?" Lena asked. "Monitoring and research. They want to study human immunity more, understand the mechanisms before making decisions. They're proposing a 5-year review period." "That's just delayed rejection." Chen didn't argue. "The third group wants to continue current integration. They argue that human medical knowledge has value that outweighs the ethical concerns." "How big is the third group?" "Small," Chen admitted. maybe 15% of the assembly representatives. The rest are split between the other two camps. Lena looked out at the holographic forest. Earth's forests, recorded decades ago. She wondered if they still looked like this, or if time and change had transformed them into something else. "What about Imara?" she asked. "Have you seen them?" Chen hesitated. "They've been in the wards, working, not talking much." "Not talking to humans, you mean?" "Lena." "It's fine." She stood, walking to the display wall. "I knew this would happen. I just didn't expect it to hurt this much." Chen left her alone after that. Lena spent hours staring at the false forest, thinking about immune systems and violence and the impossible weight of evolution. She thought about the first humans who'd survived infections that should have killed them. The ones whose immune systems had been just aggressive enough, just controlled enough, to fight off the threat without destroying the host. Billions of years of trial and error written into her DNA. Billions of deaths teaching bodies how to survive. And now that survival was being judged. On the 8th day of her confinement, Lena's interface chimed. A message from Tame. She opened it, expecting another update on the debate, another delay. Instead, it was an invitation. "Dr. Voss, Ward 7, immediately, bring your medical kit." She was moving before she'd fully processed the words. The lift, the corridors, the ward doors. Her legs carried her on autopilot while her mind raced. Another outbreak, a complication in the recovered patients, something worse. The doors opened, she stopped. The ward was full, not with patients, with physicians. Dozens of them from species she recognized and some she didn't. They turned as she entered, their attention focusing on her like a weight. In the center stood Imara, beside one of the empty cradles. "Dr. Voss," Imara said formally, "thank you for coming." Lena walked forward slowly, scanning for threats, for problems, for any sign of what emergency had summoned her. But the ward was calm. The monitors showed steady rhythms. No alarms, no crisis. "What's going on?" she asked. Imara's secondary arms moved in a gesture Lena had never seen before. "We've been studying your protocols, the antibiotics, the anti-inflammatory compounds. We've been treating them as tools, as things we borrowed from human medicine." "That's what they are." "No," Imara moved closer. "They're more than that. They're solutions to problems we didn't know existed until you showed us. And as we've studied them, we've started asking different questions." Another physician stepped forward, the Keshari. "Your immune system evolved in response to threats, constant, deadly threats, but those threats still exist in the galaxy. We just didn't see them because we had no framework for understanding them." Lena felt her pulse quicken. "What are you saying?" "We're saying," Imara continued, "that the pathogen that infected my patients wasn't an isolated incident. It was a symptom of something larger. The galaxy has microorganisms we've never identified because we had no reason to look for them. Our species evolved without them, or in balance with them. But that doesn't mean they're not there." A Vorn physician activated a holographic display. It showed microbial samples, genetic sequences, distribution patterns. "We've been scanning station systems, analyzing samples from multiple worlds. We're finding evidence of bacterial and viral life forms we never knew existed. Most are harmless, but some could be threats," Lena finished, "to species without immune systems." "Yes," Tame emerged from the crowd. "Dr. Voss, we've been so focused on the violence of your immune system that we failed to see what it protects against. You're not carrying weapons inside you. You're carrying shields, shields we might desperately need." Lena looked around the room, at the gathered physicians, at the displays showing invisible threats. "You want human immunological knowledge." "We need it," Tame corrected. "Not just for treatment, but for prevention, for understanding what exists in our galaxy that we've been blind to. Your species evolved to see these threats because you had to. We need you to teach us how to see them too." But the vote, Lena said, the debate about human violence, is ongoing, Tame admitted. And it should be. These are real ethical concerns. The violence of the immune system isn't diminished by its utility, but utility matters too. Cost and benefit, risk and reward. Imara stepped closer, close enough that Lena could see the patterns in their translucent skin. I was wrong, they said quietly. Not about the violence. You do carry violence inside you, but I was wrong about what that means. Imara. Let me finish. Imara's primary arms reached out, hovering near Lena's shoulders without touching. I called it genocide. I called it abhorrent. And in isolation, maybe it is. But context matters, as you said. You don't have immune systems because you're violent species. You have them because your world demanded it. And now we're learning that maybe the galaxy demands it too. We're not asking you to be proud of the violence, the Keshari said. We're asking you to share the knowledge anyway, because lives depend on it. Lena felt something tight in her chest begin to loosen. Not much, not completely, but enough to breathe. What do you need? She asked. Everything, Tame said. A complete immunology curriculum, training programs for alien physicians, protocols for identifying and treating infections we don't have names for yet. We need to build from scratch what your species learned over millions of years. That will take time, years, maybe decades. We know, but we need to start now. Tame moved to the holographic display. The vote on human medical status will happen regardless. Some species will always see human biology as incompatible with their values. But others, many others, are beginning to understand that the galaxy is more dangerous than we believed. That survival sometimes requires methods we'd prefer not to need. You're saying the vote might go differently than you expected, Lena said. I'm saying, Tame replied, that reality has a way of complicating ideology. Yes, human immune systems are violent. Yes, they represent a form of existence many species find disturbing. But they're also effective, and effectiveness matters when lives are at stake. Lena looked at Imara. Do you believe that, or are you just saying it because you need me? Imara was quiet for a long moment. Both, they finally said. I need your knowledge. The galaxy needs your knowledge. But that doesn't erase my discomfort with where that knowledge comes from. I don't know if I'll ever be comfortable with immune systems, with the idea of bodies at war with themselves. That's honest. It's all I have. Imara's posture shifted, opening slightly. But I'm willing to work past my discomfort, if you're willing to work past your anger at being judged. Lena thought about the past 8 days. The isolation, the fear, the bitter taste of watching her species being debated like a problem to be solved. She thought about Imara calling her biology genocide. And she thought about the 2 Quellen patients, alive and recovered. About future patients who might need the same help, about physicians across the galaxy who needed to learn what threats they'd been blind to. I'll do it, she said, but on one condition. Name it, Tame said. Honesty goes both ways. If you want me to teach, to share human immunological knowledge, then you have to accept what that means. Not just the useful parts, all of it. The autoimmune diseases, the allergies, the cytokine storms. You have to learn about immune systems as they actually are, not as you wish they were. We understand. No, Lena's voice was firm. You understand the concept, but when I teach about inflammatory responses, some of you will be disgusted. When I explain phagocytosis, some will call it barbaric, and I need you to sit with that discomfort instead of asking me to sanitize it. Because this is what human medicine is. This is what we offer. Take it or leave it, but don't ask me to pretend it's something else. The room fell silent. Lena watched the physicians exchange glances, saw Tame and Imara communicate in the subtle ways their species used. She waited. Agreed, Tame finally said. We'll learn it honestly, even the parts that disturb us. Then I'll teach, Lena said. The weeks that followed were intense. Lena designed a curriculum that started with microbiology basics and built toward complex immunological concepts. She taught classes to groups of physicians, walking them through the mechanisms of innate and adaptive immunity. She showed them human case studies, the full spectrum from successful immune responses to catastrophic failures. Some physicians couldn't finish the courses. The Vaughan representative left after the lecture on sepsis, their form rippling with distress. Several others withdrew during the autoimmune disease module, but more stayed, more learned, more began to understand. And slowly, the station's medical systems changed. Microbial scanners were recalibrated to detect pathogens they'd been blind to. Pharmaceutical synthesizers were programmed with antibiotic formulas. Protocols were written for inflammatory responses, for infection control, for the careful balance between too much immune activity and not enough. Imara attended every class. They sat in the front row, their forearms taking notes, their face betraying nothing. But they never left early. They never looked away from the difficult parts. And after each session, they stayed to ask questions. "Does it hurt?" they asked one day after a lecture on inflammation. "The immune response. Do humans feel their bodies fighting?" "Sometimes," Lena said. "Fever, swelling, pain at the infection site. Yes, we feel it. And you just endure it. We take medicine to manage the symptoms, but essentially, yes, we endure it." Imara's secondary arms moved in that gesture Lena still couldn't interpret. "I'm trying to imagine it, feeling your body fight, knowing that the pain is your own cells working. It becomes normal. You don't think about it unless something goes wrong. But it's never really not happening, is it? Your immune system is always active, always patrolling, always ready." "Yes." Imara looked at the holographic display still showing immune cells in circulation. "I think that's what disturbs me most. Not the violence itself, but the constancy of it. You never get to not be at war." Lena thought about how to answer that. "We don't think of it as war. We think of it as protection, like how you probably don't think about your heart beating or your lungs breathing. It's just maintenance." "But hearts don't kill things." "No," Lena admitted, "they don't." They stood in silence for a moment. Then Imara said, "The vote is in 3 days." Lena had been trying not to think about it. "I know. Tame thinks it will go in favor of continued integration. Maybe with additional monitoring, but no segregation." "And you," Lena asked, "how do you think it will go?" "I think," Imara said slowly, "that the galaxy is learning that peace isn't the same as safety. That cooperation doesn't eliminate all threats. That sometimes you need species who evolved in violence to show you how to survive it." "That's not exactly a ringing endorsement of humanity." "No, but it's honest." Imara turned to face her fully. "I still don't like what you carry inside you, Lena. I still find immune systems disturbing, but I'm grateful they exist, and I'm grateful you're willing to teach us about them despite how we've judged you." Lena felt something loosen in her chest. Not forgiveness, it was too soon for that, but maybe the beginning of it. "Thank you," she said. Imara left her alone in the teaching room. Lena stood among the holographic displays of cells and antibodies and inflammatory cascades, and thought about the vote that would determine her species' future. She thought about all the physicians learning to see threats they'd never imagined. She thought about immune systems and whether they were shields or swords. Maybe they were both. Maybe that was the point. The day of the vote arrived. Lena wasn't allowed to attend the session. No humans were. They waited in their quarters, watching the station's chronometer, marking time until the decision that would reshape their lives. Dr. Chen paced. Dr. Okonkwo sat very still, hands folded. Dr. Yuki worked on research, pretending not to care. Lena stood by the display wall, staring at the false forest, and tried not to think about what came next. Her interface chimed. She looked down, a message from Imara. "Ward 7, come alone." Lena's heart lurched. She left without telling the others, half running through corridors that seemed longer than she remembered. The ward doors opened and she burst through. Imara stood alone in the empty ward. "The vote?" Lena asked immediately. Still ongoing. Imara's posture was neutral, unreadable. "That's not why I called you." "Then why?" Imara moved to one of the cradles, their hands resting on its edge. "I've been thinking about what you said, about immune systems not knowing the difference between self and invader, about autoimmune diseases." "Imara, when the immune system attacks the body," Imara continued, "it's not trying to cause harm. It's doing what it was designed to do, protect. But it makes a mistake. It identifies something as foreign that's actually part of the self." Lena moved closer. "That's right. I made that mistake," Imara said quietly. "With you, with humans, I saw the violence of your biology and identified you as foreign, as incompatible, as something to be isolated and removed. You weren't wrong. We are different, fundamentally different." "Different, yes. Foreign, no." Imara turned to face her. "You're part of the galactic community. You've been part of it for decades. And I treated you like an invader because I couldn't reconcile your biology with my values." "Imara, you don't have to." "I do." Imara's primary arms reached out, and this time they made contact, resting gently on Lena's shoulders. "Because I hurt you, not physically, but I hurt you, and I'm sorry." Lena felt her throat tighten. "You were scared, it's understandable." "Understanding doesn't erase harm. Your immune system might not know when it's making mistakes, but I do. And I made one. A serious one." They stood close, human and Quellan, two species that shouldn't have been compatible finding a way to be. Lena thought about all the times she'd tried to explain immune systems without making them sound monstrous. All the times she'd failed. "Does your immune system know the difference between self and invader?" Imara asked. "Most of the time, but not always. And when it makes mistakes, when it attacks what it should protect. We treat it, suppress the immune response, try to retrain it, but sometimes the damage is permanent." Imara's grip tightened slightly on her shoulders. "I don't want the damage to be permanent between us, between our species. Can we retrain this, whatever we've broken?" Lena thought about trust and how it was like tissue. It could heal, but never quite the same as before. Scars remained. Weaknesses persisted. But healing was still better than leaving the wound open. "We can try," she said. Imara's interface chimed. They checked it and their posture changed. "The vote is finished." Lena's heart stopped. "And continued integration, with monitoring requirements and mandatory immunology training for all station personnel." Imara looked up. "Humanity stays." Lena felt her legs go weak. "They voted for us." It wasn't unanimous. 37% voted for segregation. 15% abstained. But the majority agreed that human medical knowledge is necessary, that the galaxy needs what you can teach us. Even though they find us disturbing. Especially because they find you disturbing, because that disturbance comes from recognizing real threats they've been blind to. Imara released her shoulders. "You were right, Lena. Context matters. Intent matters. And the intent behind human immune systems is survival, not violence for its own sake. But the violence is still real." "Yes, and we still have to learn to live with that, to learn from it, to use it without becoming comfortable with it." Imara's secondary arms moved in a new gesture, one Lena had never seen. "That's what makes this hard. Accepting help from systems we find morally troubling, but the alternative is worse." Lena looked around the empty ward. She thought about the patients who'd been here, dying from something their bodies couldn't fight. She thought about future patients, across hundreds of worlds, who might need the same help. She thought about the long work ahead, teaching immunity to species that found it abhorrent. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now," Imara said, "you go back to work. The council wants you to establish a formal immunology institute, training programs, research facilities. You'll have resources, staff, authority to shape how the galaxy learns about immune defense. That's a lot of responsibility. You've earned it, you saved lives, you changed minds, not all of them, but enough. Imara moved toward the ward doors, and you taught me something important. What's that? That survival isn't clean, that sometimes protection requires violence, that the universe doesn't care about our preferences for peace. Imara paused at the doors. I don't like that lesson, but I'm grateful I learned it from you. They left. Lena stood alone in the ward, surrounded by empty cradles and quiet monitors. She thought about immune systems and evolution, and the long, brutal history that had written defense mechanisms into human DNA. She thought about the vote, and the 37% who'd wanted her species isolated. She thought about the work ahead, the years of teaching and research and careful navigation of species that would never fully accept what she represented. She thought about autoimmune diseases and how sometimes the body attacks itself trying to protect itself, how good intentions and violent methods could coexist, how healing sometimes required harm. Her interface chimed again. A message from Dr. Chen, we heard. Celebration in the common area, you coming? Lena typed a reply, soon, need a moment. She walked to the nearest cradle and placed her hand on its edge, where Imara's hands had been. The surface was warm, designed to comfort healing bodies. She closed her eyes and felt her pulse steady beneath her skin, felt her heart pumping blood through vessels, delivering oxygen, carrying immune cells on their endless patrol. Billions of cells inside her, programmed to fight, programmed to survive, programmed to make her possible in a universe that didn't care whether she lived or died. She opened her eyes and looked at her hand, ordinary, human, carrying both shield and sword. She could live with that. She would have to. Lena left the ward and headed toward the common area, toward the celebration, toward colleagues who'd waited with her through the uncertainty. The corridors of medical station kindness stretched before her, full of species she'd help keep alive, full of physicians she'd teach to see threats they'd never imagined. Behind her, the ward doors closed. The monitors pulsed their steady rhythms, and inside her body, her immune system continued its work, silent, constant, necessary. War in service of peace. Violence in service of life. She could explain that now, had explained it, would keep explaining it for as long as it took for the galaxy to understand. Or at least to accept.